Hi there, this is Daniel from YVR Spotter Daniel. I've received a number of requests as of recently to make an editing tutorial, so here I am finally going and doing it. I am looking at doing two series on this channel, one for more beginners, just the basics of how to edit, and one for more advanced recoveries. This is going to be my first more advanced recovery, actually, and I'm taking a look at this Etihad Airways A350 night shot at JFK that I took back in July. If we take a look at the shot, we can see that there's definitely some issues with it. I mean, it's definitely under sharpened, and there's some blurring in it as well. Uh, so what I first went ahead and did was I took a look at Topaz Denoise AI and Topaz Sharpen AI, which I definitely recommend you do. I am not going to go into details on that in this video. I just use basically the basic edits that they recommend I do, and that does a pretty good job, I find. This is a perfect example of a shot that most people would go ahead and throw out. It's definitely something that takes a bit of time to recover. However, the reason I did decide to keep this was because I found the beacon quite interesting, and I'll go through the thought process of what I do with this shot in just a second. It should be noted that this was not the original shot that I'll be looking at in Photoshop today. I did run it through Lightroom. However, I'm assuming most of you already know how to use the app, and I'll definitely be taking a look at that in later tutorials. I basically just increased the exposure on this one. So a major advantage of working with Photoshop is the ability to work with layers, and you'll see me doing that a lot when I'm in Photoshop. So what I did here is press Command J on Mac and Control J on PC, and I'll rename each of the layers so I don't get lost during the edit. So I'm going to try and keep the reds very vibrant here in the front, and looking at this photo is kind of reminded of the Supernatural with those blues peeking in from the bottom. It kind of gave me Stranger Things vibes. I don't know if you've seen that show. I love this aspect of the photo, so I'm definitely going to try and push those blues from the bottom. Next, I'm going to highlight the lights at the top. Um, including the smaller ones in the background. This is to make them pop and make the final image look a lot more realistic. I'm going to also mask not only the Etihad aircraft, but I'm also going to look at masking the JetBlue one once again to make it more realistic. And finally, I'm going to tie it all up by adding a dark gradient coming down from the top, just to give it more of a night vibe. Now that I've gone through what I'm want to do for this shot, I just want to clarify I usually don't have this clear of a view on what I want to achieve. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to make a duplicate of this layer here. We're going to do that by either pressing Command or Control J, or right-clicking and pressing Duplicate Layer. Let's rename that so we don't get lost. And then we're going to go up to the top of this screen and click on the filter file. This is once again at the top. And we're going to click on Convert for Smart Filters. Smart Filters allows us to go back and make changes to the edit even after we've closed our Camera Raw filter. Now we're going to make another duplicate of this layer here. This is just to save us the step of having to convert the next layer to a Smart Filter once again. We're going to rename this as well, and now we're going to begin our masking. So now we're going to select the subject of the photo or the aircraft. We can do this in a number of ways. We can use the lasso tool and freehand it. We can use the quick selection tool and select areas of it. We can go up to the select file up top, click select subject, and we can add to the selection by pressing down Shift and the quick selection tool. To deselect it, we're going to press Command or Control D. And we are actually going to use the pen tool, which I will go into more details on in a later tutorial. So the basics of using the pen tool is we're going to select the outline of the aircraft. We're just going to left click on the outline and it's going to draw a line. If we want to do a curve on the aircraft, we're just going to have to left click and hold down and then move the mouse up and down while continuing to hold down. I'm just going to quickly select the rest of this aircraft and I'll be back once I've selected it. So when you select the aircraft, you're going to leave little boxes behind you, and to finish off selecting the aircraft, you're just gonna click the first little box that or mark that you left behind, and we're gonna just once you've done this, we're gonna right click and we're gonna click make selection. You're gonna make sure that it's as I show on the screen, and this is gonna leave a little bit of a marching ants pattern, which means that it's been selected. Click the little box in the bottom with the circle in the middle. This is to mask it. And we're just going to make another copy of the bottom layer, and we're going to call that the JetBlue mask. This is going to be the Etihad mask. And we're just going to do the same thing as we did with the Etihad aircraft, so I'll be right back. Lions roaring in the morning sun, searching for a longer day. People feeling like the light has just come. We must never stop the way, yeah. Birds chirping and I hear my name, grasping into life. So once again, right click, make selection, and we're just going to leave it with one feather radius, and we're going to press OK, and then that's going to allow us to mask it again. So what a mask basically does is it cuts out the back. Anything that's black is cut, anything that white remains in the photo. So we're going to actually get started with the edit itself right now. And what we're going to do is, what we're trying to do with any of my shots is to make the aircrafts pop and stand out from the background. And so the way we're going to get started with the edit is we're going to go down to the thumbnail of the background layer. I'm going to click that and then go up to filter at the top and click camera raw filter. So when you launch camera raw filter, you're going to see that it's very similar to Lightroom, and again, a lot of you are probably quite familiar with that. What we're going to try and do is what I had previously said. We're going to add a gradient, increase the saturation of the reds, and bring in the blues from the bottom. Before we do that, though, I'm going to do a little bit of adjustments. I'm going to maybe increase the exposure a little bit, increase the contrast, bring up the highlights a bit, and maybe just reduce the shadows a little bit as well. Although I do enjoy playing around with these sliders and seeing what works best. We can maybe try adding a bit of clarity, although I'm not entirely sure if that's going to be necessary. And just double click on the slider itself to bring it back to 0, because I don't really feel like I need the clarity. So we're just going to open the mask portion of this camera raw filter, and that's just the circle on the side. I'm going to add a gradient mask, and we're going to drag it down quite a ways. You can see that the more opaque red portion at the top is where it's going to be darker, and it's going to fade out pretty much towards the bottom, the second portion of that gradient. We're going to play a little bit with the sliders to see what looks best, but I'm definitely going to aim to reduce the exposure, increase the contrast, increase the highlights to bring out some of those highlights, reduce shadows, once again increase the lights to bring out some of that highlights, and then we're going to go create another mask, just the big blue plus mark at the top. We're going to mostly be using these middle three. These top and the bottom ones aren't really going to be used often on camera raw. And what we're going to do is we're just going to, so when you use the radial gradient, we're just going to make a little circle here. And I'm just going to pull it on top of one of these areas that I would like a little more brightened. I'm just going to increase the exposure, increase the contrast, increase the highlights. And I'm definitely going to make sure to increase the clarity. This just makes the edges that I want dark a little darker. And then I'm going to use the small plus on the bottom, the add button, to make another radial gradient. And I'm going to continue doing this for all the lights here. And then you can also name these layers just to keep track of them as you're going. So we still have a few areas that we need to lighten up here. We have the small little lights, and we have the small lights on the taxiway as well as the light underneath the JetBlue aircraft, likely emanating from underneath it somewhere. And what we're going to do now is we're going to use the brush mask actually, and we're going to just go ahead and select these smaller ones, and then we're going to use the radial gradient for the light underneath the JetBlue aircraft. You can edit the size of the brush here. You can reduce it, or you can reduce the feather. And you can also hold down shift to reduce the feather on the brush, as well as just scroll up or down to reduce the size of the brush itself. We're going to leave the brush at around 25%, and we're going to just go over here and we're going to start selecting each of these and increasing the brightness. So the reason I'm adding these as separate layers instead of adding them to my previous layer, where I brightened up the size of the background, is because I can kind of customize these rather than making them the same brightness that I did for the signs in the background. So I kind of just wanted to show you that when I'm using the brush tool, if I press down Option, I can actually erase from the stroke I left. However, I can also do that by just simply clicking Subtract in the bottom, and I can just select the brush there. Once again, to change the brush size, it is just to scroll the wheel up or down, and then same deal for the changing the feather with holding down Shift. So now I'm just going to go ahead and increase the saturation of the reds, and I'm going to do that actually by selecting another radial gradient, and I'm just going to expand it over the reds, and I'm really just going to aim at increasing the saturation. Obviously, I'm going to try and do a little bit of tweaks to the area just to make it look a little better, but I'm just going to pump up the saturation all the way and maybe just make it so it covers it more. And then we're going to go ahead and for the blues, we're just going to do another radial gradient, make it slightly overlap onto the image, and I'm going to reduce the exposure and reduce the temperature to bring out that blue. And to add more of a blue tint, I'm going to go down to the color section and just sample a blue that I like, and that looks about right. I'm just going to leave it there. And I'm just going to do the same thing on the other side by adding another radial gradient. I feel like it might look a little better if I add a bit more blues, just because they do seem a little bit undersaturated. So I'm going to just increase the saturation, and that looks about right there. And I'm done with this, and I'm just going to click OK. It's going to update, and that's what it looks like. And I think that's actually pretty good. That's sort of what I was looking to get at. Just click the eyeball on the side, and you can hide the layer and see what it was like before. Now we're going to go on, and we're going to actually edit the Etihad Aircraft Max. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to click the little thumbnail of the Etihad Aircraft, and we're going to go up to Filter and Camera Raw Filter once again. I'm going to tweak it a little bit once again, just to bring out the clarity, increase the exposure, increase the highlights, and maybe just reduce the shadows a little bit there. Now if we look at the cockpit, you can see that there's a little bit of lights on there, so we're just going to add another brush layer and select these lights here, and we're just going to increase the contrast and the highlights a little bit, just to bring that up. You can maybe bump up the exposure too, just to kind of clarify that this is indeed a night shot. And I'm just going to do a few more little edits on it, maybe change the coloration a little bit. So I'll be right back. And once again, I'm done, so I'm just going to click the OK at the bottom, and that's that. And there we go, that actually looks pretty good. And finally, we're going to go ahead and edit the mask of our JetBlue aircraft at the top, just to make it a little more realistic, because it does seem a little bit dark at the moment. So we're just going to do the same thing as we did with the Etihad aircraft. We're going to open Camera Raw Filter, and once again, we're just going to make a few tweaks to it. So kind of an important thing to remember is that when you're editing these shots, even though it looks like the whole shot is changing, it's only really affecting the area that was selected. So that did throw me off a little bit when I first began editing with Photoshop and Camera Raw. That's just something to keep in mind. So I feel like I finally kind of achieved the looks I was going for with this shot. So we're just going to do some final touch-ups before we finish off. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to select the background layer, and we're going to hold down Shift and click on the JetBlue layer. We're going to make a duplicate of those three layers, and then we're going to right-click and merge the layers. We're going to rename this as Final Touch-Ups. And just so it doesn't get overly crowded here, we're actually going to go and put the other edits into a group. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to once again select all of the layers, so the background layer and then all the way up to the JetBlue layer. And we're going to press Command or Control G, or just the little folder icon at the bottom. We can hide this because we don't need it anymore. And then just by clicking the right DI icon by the top layer, we can reveal the before of this shot. And what we're going to do now is we're going to just convert it into a smart filter. If you remember how to do that, that's just the filter file up top, and then just convert for smart filter, press OK. And then we're going to give it a camera raw filter. And I feel like I'm just going to increase the exposure a little bit and maybe nudge up the contrast as well, just to get that final touch, the final little bit of contrast. Click OK, because I think that's just about right there. And there we go. That's going to be your final product. There's the before and after. And there's the before and after with the original image that I started off with. I would like to ask that you do not like one-for-one copy what I do, because I feel like this is supposed to more of show how Photoshop works, show what you can do with Photoshop, and you're ultimately going to get a lot more out of it if you go ahead and take what I do, use it maybe as inspiration, but make your own work out of it. If you do that, please do tag me in your photos so I can maybe see them. I'd love to see what you guys come up with. This video was also kind of just to show you that you can make actual pretty good photos out of even failed shots, and how you don't really need top quality camera to get those shots. And if you're not getting super sharp and super good quality shots, you can still go ahead and make those into actually pretty good photos. I hope you enjoyed this video once again, and I hope it was informative, and I hope to see you again in the future. Please do consider following my Instagram at YVRSpotterDaniel, and thank you. Bye bye.
The birds have just begun.